This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत. बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
This is Bharat FM.
Welcome to Stars Aligned. My guest today is Neelesh Misra, journalist, writer, Hindi cinema lyricist, rural journalism pioneer, and a genuine radio star. If you are wondering about the media platforms that Neelesh leaps over, let me just liken him to a highly accomplished Cirque de Soleil performer who manages to stay in the air just for the right amount of time. In the interest of full disclosure, I have known Neelesh for as long as he has been a journalist, which is well past a quarter century now. In fact, rather than getting into his very distinguished career, I would like to narrate my very first encounter with Neelesh when he came freshly out of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. And I was then at that point heading a wire service called the India Abroad News Service. And it was my task to interview new aspiring journalists. And Neelesh was one of the four who walked in. And my simple test for him was to give him a particularly bad copy to rewrite. Rather than doing a back and forth interview, I just gave him that little copy. And something told me even when I was talking to him that this young man is going to nail it. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, he had turned the copy around, making it sharply news copy, which is what we were looking for. So that little bit of an exercise got him hired at the INS, and the rest, as they say, is history. But before we get into what he has been doing all these years, there is one little thing that I would like to point out. One of the constant refrains as a young man that Neelesh had even then, I don't know if he still has, was मैं ज़माने का सताया हुआ हूँ. तो मैं आज जब नीलेश को देखता हूँ तो महसूस तो यही होता है कि उस जमाने ने उनको अपनी बाहों में ले लिया है. तो वेलकम टू भारत एफएम Neelesh, all the way from India. It's a great pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Let's start with extremely basic stuff. जिंदगी कैसे चल रही है? जमाना अब भी सता रहा है आपको?
थोड़ा मैं जमाने को सताता हूँ और थोड़ा जमाना मुझको. ये खेल चलता रहता है थोड़ा सा.
तो अभी जीतता कौन है आजकल?
मौसम चलते हैं. तो इन गर्मियों में अप्रैल मई के आसपास जमाना जीत रहा था. फिर मैंने एक पुश किया तो अब लगता है कि चीजें थोड़ा मेरे हाथ में है.
Like I said in my introduction, you have done several things simultaneously across media platforms.
Right.
First, describe the challenges in doing so many things together for especially those who aspire to do at least one of them when they graduate from whatever they are doing.
I think I have been extremely greedy. The primary emotion that drives me is the greed to do new things, and I think I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do most of them. When I was starting out as a school kid in Nainital, I wanted to do at least 10 things. I wanted to do to have a band. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to run a newspaper, work in advertising, and multiple other things. And I'm extremely fortunate that I could do most of them. So my privilege is that I've been able to not do anything boring ever for a living. When it was journalism, I worked in only 3 companies: India Abroad, then the Associated Press, and then the Hindustan Times, which I hope was the last day job of my life. And the kind of journalism that I got to do was extremely different from what my classmates were doing, what my colleagues were doing. I was not covering any beat. There was storytelling from the beginning in the journalism, and excuse me. And then Bollywood happened, which was purely an extension of my own desire to sort of do things that that secretly I wanted to do, and then I ended up doing some of them. Lyric writing was one of them. So then books happened, and then radio happened, and then in a moment of stupidity, I became an entrepreneur, and having those blues happened. It's been a fairly crazy ride, and like you said, all of them are independent careers. Each one of them actually, and there were different lifetimes. To be in I mean, my day, I reboot so many times during my day that it's nuts. One moment I might be discussing a story for Gaon Connection, the rural media platform I run. It could be something around storytelling, or a platform we have called Mike, or a slow interview edit, or and we're about to launch, products, and but I don't think I would have it any other way. I think now I would greatly feel a vacuum if all this was not there. I miss having a strong second line though. I end up doing a lot of this myself, so trying to work on that. But yeah, it's a crazy ride, and thank God for it.
Couple of points jump out at me. One is how does one avoid spreading oneself too thin? That's number one. And number two, each of the silos that you described, I'm sure has its own great highs and great lows. So let's first begin with avoiding spreading yourself too thin. How do you do that?
I think I have been spreading myself too thin, but now when I looked back, just to sort of give you a sense of my scattered life, it had journalism, it has storytelling, it has writing for Bollywood, it has some books, it has uh, radio, and then the life of a performer, a stage performer, all of that. But when I look back, and this is recent, this is as recent as this February, I look back and I realize that there is one word which sums up my entire journey, and that is the word, that is the name I gave to my home in my village 2 years ago, which is slow. Because I was used to live in Bombay, moved back to Lucknow, and then within that return was another return when I moved to my village, and in this completely abandoned part of my father's land, where there were large bushes and snakes and scorpions. We built 3 rooms and then started living there. And one day my wife asked me, well, we have to give this a name. And I said, well, I don't want some fancy fake name, and let's give it a name that that's about how we feel when we come here. So we called it Slow. And so now I'm trying to organize everything under this. This has now become the master brand, so to say, because I started purely for fun, having these conversations with people who visited me at Slow. So it became the Slow interview, and that combined with Gaon Connection and our effort to be more rooted, to empower farmers, to provide consumers with more healthy products, led to Slow products. So suddenly we started making cookies, 100% millet-based cookies. Now, it might seem spreading too thin, but is there a tenuous thread tying it? Yes, I think so. So it aligned with, so now I'm trying to bring it all together in one superstructure, which none of that will go out of the sort of the wireframe of integrity or the values that I've tried to build in everything I do, from journalism to how a communicator should be on mass radio, etc. So it's falling into place. So there is Slow Content, which is a separate company which does audio and video content. There is Slow Products, which is doing all these different products. We're coming out with honey and salts and all of that. And then there's Slow Experiences, which is about a lot of people want to come and stay at my village home. So we're building some cottages there, and then another one in Dehradun, near Dehradun. But yeah, so I was spreading myself too thin, but now I think I found order and I found linkages between everything I do, and they don't seem so disparate anymore. I might be shooting something that is produced by Slow Content, which features a product by Slow Products, but which is in a location owned by Slow Experiences, that kind of thing. Because I have a fetish for new ideas, and that's kind of I haven't said it like this in public before, but it sometimes feel like a curse. Uh, eh, because all of my ideas are very big. They're hugely scalable, and I start by thinking big, and they're doable. They're not undoable ideas. I know exactly how to do them and how to execute them. Um, but I used to come up, like, we launched a platform called Mike, it started with the question in my head: where will the next 1,000 Neelesh Misras come from? This cannot be just a story about me. So how do we give a platform to multilingual storytellers, to poets, to singers who don't, in today's day and age of the algorithm, while it seems that we are, that fame is easy, that you can get on a Facebook feed and Facebook Live and get to thousands of people, it's not so, because the algorithms want you to pay for that access.
Sure.
So I want to stand with the person who could not make it for those first 3 pages of that YouTube search, the first 3 pages of that TripAdvisor search. How do we bring them to the forefront? Because they might have talent, they might have great things, they might have great places to. So that's how we started Mike, and then suddenly Mike was jutting out of the other things I was doing. So then Mike now is part of Slow Content, and so yeah, I mean, you've raised a very pertinent point about how do I bring it all together, and that's precisely what I'm trying to do now.
Once again, I have to point out, when you talk of slow, is it a sort of state of pace? Or because obviously there is a lot of frenzy in what you do, given the number of things that you do. So slow seems almost contradictory when you describe what you do. How do you reconcile being a slow company and doing so many frenzied things?
Slow is about unhurried content, about uncorrupted food, about going back to basics, about going back to where it all began. When I started storytelling on radio, and I had never written a story in my life, I'd never been in front of a mic. And that has been so in everything I've done. I was thinking about it just this morning, that my biggest strength is I don't know how to do something that I'm starting. I don't know how to do storytelling. Thank God I didn't know, because if I did, I would speak a certain way, there'd be a certain intonation, that I would sound like an advertising voice. But I didn't, so I did it my way. And I just, like, I tweeted this morning, some top TV journalists had complimented us on our latest episode, and I said, look, I'm a print guy. I don't know how a camera works, and that's my strength, because I don't know the rules.
Right.
So I have no baggage of convention, and I had to make my team unlearn a lot, because they come from rules and conventions. They tell me that, oh, there's a certain access between two people who are talking between each other and on camera, and I said, well, chuck the access. Um, so I think what I've tried to do, what I try to do and project and live also is whether when it's radio content, we are swimming against the current. I'm swimming against the current in pretty much everything I'm doing, not because of any bravado or I don't want to be a hero, but like I said, I don't know how else to do it. I don't know how to do it. So when we did storytelling, if there was a marketing person driving that show, he or she would ask me, "Hey, what's your TG?" And I would not know my TG. My effort would be just to tell one bloody good story every day. That's all. I don't care who's listening. And I suddenly found, because I didn't define a TG, everybody was listening. There was the 5-year-old kid, there was his or her grandmother, the CEO, the driver. You know, it was a dream as a communicator to be able to bring together so many different strata, the well off, the not so well off, people across geographies, people across urban, rural. It was mind boggling. Same thing for pretty much everything I've done. So for rural, my rural platform now, when I started it, I was there's a sentence I've been told a lot in my lives in different words, but it's always the same thing. This is a brilliant idea. It will never work. So when I started a band, which was a storytelling band, these are the precise words told to me by a lady in a top events company. Then I started Gaon Connection, and people said, "Hey, what's there to report about in rural India? And who wants to know about anything that's going on in rural India?" When I started storytelling, they said, "Who wants to listen to stories at prime time?" At prime time, and these are not salacious, titillating stories, because on the other networks there would be item numbers playing, Bollywood songs playing, but this was proper. This was seen as literature. So that is slow to me,
Right.
to be able to craft my own path, which has an integrity, which has integrity built into it. There's a lot of content that I've never done. I've never stereotyped people on my show, which is a shortcut for people on the basis of their gender, their sex, their color of skin, which part of the country they come from, the part how they talk, how they walk. These are easy shortcuts to create humor on TV and radio. We've never followed them. That is slow to me. In journalism, we've stuck to the old world, old fashioned, the era that you and I belong to. That era of journalism. Yes, of course, trying to ride the digital wave, but not using clickbait,
Right.
not using content that's salacious to drive traffic. Not at all. So I think that is slow
Oh,
to me. So while the pace is fairly
yeah.
fast,
Company's
yeah,
company space is frenzied, but the content that you produce has, as they say,
yeah,
ठहराव है उसमें.
कोशिश यही रहती है.
Gigi, even as you were describing what you do, I was thinking that just as there's as much art to storytelling on the radio that you do, there is in some ways equal art to listening to it patiently, because for you to find listeners in this numbers, you have to have people who have the means to sit for 30, 40, 50 minutes to hear some guy talk. Now, that requires a great deal of patience too. So I'm glad that you have an audience of the kind in India that is willing. I mean, we were talking numbers earlier. You're looking at about, 40 million people who have at one point been your listeners. So how would you describe India's habit of wanting to listen to stories that are being told? Is it a long history of having done it, or where do you think that comes from?
We have the world's oldest traditions of oral storytelling from the days of the Upanishads. What happened was that when, so for generations, parents, as you know, would tell stories to their kids, but then changes started to happen. Cable TV came in. I mean, and these are milestones in my head. Could be sociological study of some sort. But when cable TV came in, that relationship was snapped for the first time, the relationship of storytelling, because even the parents, even the grandparents were busy when they should have been narrating stories, and of course the kids. And then economic liberalization happened in India, and this might be a very journalistic joining the dots kind of linkage, but when privatization happened, working hours changed. So suddenly, the parents were coming home at 8, 9. That was the new normal, which was never so earlier.
Right.
So that ate into family time, that ate into storytelling time. We know of, and we've heard of so many parents who say that, well, when I come back, my kid is asleep, and that's the sacrifice. Storytelling is the sacrifice. So when I started in 2012, um, people said that I had revived storytelling, but I was just scraping the urban dust off the existence of millions of people who knew what this was about. They
Right.
had grown up with this. There was All India Radio, which had shows at one time. There were other similar spoken word shows, Hawa Mahal and all that. That we all in different parts of the country grew up on. And here was this guy at prime time, um, just breaking the flow as they drove back home, and kind of creating this disruption, which was very audacious, very, very audacious. And the stories that he was narrating were their stories. Because so in the first season, I wrote all the stories, and it was nothing. It was just me, and I'm a fairly good listener, which I believe is a prerequisite to becoming a good writer. Um, eh, People I saw, people I had grown up with, people I had loved or not loved or whatever, and they found their lives in them, and suddenly people started saying, "Can we write for you?" So it's a very, very pertinent question. Nobody's asked me this before about the listeners. I there was a piece, there was a Washington Post piece once where they compared me to, they called me India's Harrison Keeler.
Yep.
Um, uh, and I said, look, there's a huge growing number of listeners in India. There's not enough storytellers.
Right.
There's a huge number of story listeners now. Um, uh, we are credited with starting that subculture in 2012. Then, because it worked, other radio broadcasters started to try it. Then it led to open mic events happening in cafes, etc., across the country. So I think it started a whole subculture of the spoken word, which was not in fashion before we started. Um, and we found that there were millions of people who were. It was not difficult at all to make them listen to a story for an hour. Not at all. I mean, a lot of people started saying, "Can you do away with the songs in this 1 hour show? We just want the story." But then we had to write the story a certain way. There was a science behind it. One of the greatest myths propagated to us is that a story writes itself. No, it doesn't. We had to plan and plot a story in a way that in the era of radio advertising, where there would be 6 breaks, the plot points or the hooks had to be there before each segment, before, and the ad starts coming for some real estate or some कोई सरिया बेच रहा होगा, कोई ईंटा बेच रहा होगा, and you had to, and so Ram and Priyanka were facing each other after 13 years at the door, and then go into a song and a break, and then these silly ads. And as the show grew more and more popular, the ad space, as you know, they became longer. So at one point, the show had like 10-minute breaks between story segments, and I mean, it was a constant battle because I found it criminal to it wasn't good for the listener. I'm on the side of the listener, and I said, well, can you bunch the ads in another way? Can you have like an interval in the middle? I don't want you to lose money, but make the user experience better. But yes, listeners have not been a challenge at all, and I feel that it is us, the communicators, who haven't done our job well. We always blame the listeners. We always say that they only want to hear salacious, content or titillating content, but we didn't work hard enough. We didn't work hard enough on our writing, on our radio content, and we said, oh, ये तो item number, अच्छा ये 13-year-old है, ये तो ऐसे ही सुनते हैं.
जी.
But you know what? I feel that the audience has a split personality. And I mean, like you and I like different things at different times. So if the same 13-year-old, 14-year-old cries listening to my story and dances when they listen to a Honey Singh or some Bollywood number or whatever, and or might know classical music, or I mean, that's how we are.
Right.
But it's us, the communicators, the marketing people, who have bracketed them and slotted them as types of audiences. And I found that we were all wrong, and enough people to listen.
Yeah. To digress slightly, it might
सर
seem...
जब से मेरे को बोलने का पैसा मिलने लग गया ना, मैं बोलता बहुत हूँ.
नहीं,
जब मैं थोड़ा ज्यादा बोल रहा हूँ,
नहीं, वो थोड़ा आप ज्यादा बोल रहे हैं, वो तो सही है.
आप इशारा कर दीजिएगा कुछ.
नहीं, मैं आप ही को सुनने आए, मैं तो ऐसे ही बैठा हूँ. उसकी फिक्र मत करिए.
बाजार से निकला हूँ, खरीदार नहीं हूँ.
बिल्कुल. So I was about to ask you, in terms of, it's a bit of a trivial digression. I hear a lot of your admirers they're gushing over your voice, the quality of your voice. I mean, this is the internet, so I can say it. A lot of them sound almost orgasmic talking about your voice. So tell me, I mean, you had a nice voice. I know as a 22-year-old I've heard you, but was there any cultivation along the lines, or did you start smoking and did you make it deeper? Because Mehdi Hassan used to say that, कि थोड़ा बहुत वो करना जरूरी है, नहीं तो
नहीं.
So
sometimes people ask me this, कि आप क्या नहीं, कुछ भी नहीं. मैं तो I don't smoke. I didn't even know I was not a voice person until 2012. I was a text person.
Right.
I've been a writer for much of my life. This is just the last 7 years. The only thing related to voice that took place when I was in college, or कि भाई जब मैं लड़कियों को फोन करता था, वो कहती थी, you sound nice on the phone. बस that's it. और वरना तो ये था कि आप मेरे लिए गाना लिख दीजिए, और it was all about writing. You know, when will you write a song for me?
Right.
Was the refrain. And then this happened, and it happened purely by accident. मेरी एक कहानी है, उस पहला प्यार, उसकी एक लाइन है कि ऐसे खूबसूरत इत्तेफाक से नहीं होते.
जी.
तो अमित खन्ना, जो आपके और हमारे कॉमन फ्रेंड हैं, वो रिलायंस एंटरटेनमेंट के चेयरमैन थे उन दिनों, और उनका बड़ा रोल है इस रास्ते पे मुझे ढकेलने में. So he once sent me a Facebook friend request, which I thought was fake, because like, why would a person of his stature, I was then in Delhi, like, send me? And he said that no, I met him in Bombay. He said, I followed your work and I see a lot of me in you, क्योंकि वो भी जर्नलिस्ट थे पहले, वो प्लस चैनल वगैरह लिरिक्स लिखते थे और वो मिरर थे. तो he introduced me to Big FM, this radio network in India, and तब भी कुछ था नहीं, and they had Big Music, which was a radio, which was a music label then, and they said कि आप एल्बम करिए. तो ठीक है साहब, मैंने कहा एल्बम तो कैसे, लेकिन पैसा कैसे? तो बोले हम आपको पैसा देंगे, आप लाइव परफॉर्मेंस करिएगा और पैसा वो वापस कर दीजिएगा, उसका एक हिस्सा. बैंड बना लीजिए आप. मैंने कहा बैंड मतलब मेरे तो लंबे बाल भी नहीं है, मैं बैंड कहाँ से बना लूं? मेरे जैसे लोग तो बड़े बोरिंग होते, बैंड कहाँ से बनाएंगे? सो only to save my job. So basically, I did put together a motley group of musicians, singers, etc. One of whom was Shilpa Rao, a hugely accomplished singer. And I said, let's create a writer-led band. It was just, मतलब फेंक रहा था मैं, क्योंकि गाना आता नहीं था, मतलब बाथरूम सिंगर हूँ मैं. तो राइटर लेड, अच्छा राइटर क्या करेगा? सो ओनली टू सेव माय जॉब आई सेड राइटर स्टोरी सुनाएगा. There was a moment that changed my life because I said it. अच्छा ये कैसे होगा? नहीं, राइटर स्टोरी सुनाने जाएगा स्टेज पे, थोड़ी सी स्टोरी सुनाएगा, फिर ऑफ स्टेज आ जाएगा और राइटर का ही लिखा हुआ गाना बैंड गाएगा जो उस कहानी से जुड़ा हुआ होगा, फिर वो वापस आएगा, ऐसे चलेगा. And they said it'll never work. And I said, well, then Kala Ghoda festival जो बॉम्बे में होता है, आप जानते हैं,
Right.
उसमें we debuted, and then we next day we got a call from Saregama Music कि भाई एल्बम बनाओगे?
अच्छा.
तो our band was called a band called 9, ये नाम था उसका, band called 9.
बिल्कुल याद है.
और 9 बजे हमने डेब्यू किया और सुबह 9 बजे कॉल आ गया सारेगामा से. Or then they commissioned us to do this, and but we had no money to promote it, so I went back to Amit Khanna and I said कि वो रेडियो थोड़ा सा, तो वो और वहां से मैं तो अपना सीडी बेचने गया था रेडियो चैनल में, मेरा कोई लेना देना नहीं था. वो चूंकि टेक्स्ट लिखा था मैंने अपने काम बचाना, आई डिडंट वांट टू बी अ नॉन प्लेइंग कैप्टन, तो मैंने बोल दिया था कहानी सुनाऊंगा.
So
I was the writer of the whole thing.
you were winging it essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And फिर माइक के सामने गया तो बोला, और वो कोने में जाके साउंड इंजीनियर ना, he started furiously smoking. There was something that stirred in him.
अच्छा.
When I was recording, ये कुछ हुआ उसको और वापस आया, because he was from Kolkata. उस यादें आ गई थी, मतलब it just touched something. It was a deeply nostalgic story. And that's when I realized the power of storytelling. And then radio happened, and I had no idea how to structure a story within ad breaks, how to write. So the first story that I ever narrated is called Diwali Ki Raat. And it's still one of the most popular stories, surprisingly, after all these years. I narrated it every live performance of mine. It's just 12-13 minutes long. I didn't even know how to structure it. तो ऐसे ही अनाड़ीपन में शुरू किया था. आवाज से कोई लेना देना नहीं था इस दुनिया से. But
I'm so glad you brought it back to your voice, because I was wondering for a moment how will you complete the circle you did. To jump a bit.
सर वो जब हम लोग स्टोरी लिखते थे ना, वो एंड में किकर होता था ना.
जी बिल्कुल.
किकर है सर.
Right.
Last paragraph.
You know, you did many interesting assignments as a journalist, including the Kargil War and the 1999 hijacking of the flight 814 from Kathmandu to Delhi, which eventually ended up in Kandahar.
Right.
And then there was a story about the Royal Nepal massacre.
Right.
So it's quite a range, in Maoist insurgency you co-wrote a book on. We live in rather ghastly times when print journalists, even old-fashioned print journalists like you and I, get branded as prostitutes. I want you to explain to these massive population of ignoramuses who might be tuning in, to explain what it takes to create something on this spectrum. As a print journalist, because I don't think people realize the amount of work that goes into producing even an 800-word story. And to complete my stream of thought, I often say that these days in the social media frenzy, people confuse having opinion with having knowledge. So tell this crowd what it means to be a serious, substantive print journalist who is as far from being a prostitute as there can ever be.
I often say that these days journalists feel that they're not covering the news, they are the news. And that is what happened when you put journalists on billboards and you made them stars and The humility that was there in your time and my time, that the anonymity, the fact that you had to earn a byline, you had to really, it did not come as a matter of right. That humility went away, and arrogance came into journalism because the journalist suddenly was a brand. To us, it was a very big deal when there were. I remember Indian Express had redesigned itself, and many reporters had started getting their pictures with their bylines, and it was a big deal. I mean, like,
Yeah.
wow, you know. So I think the simple rules of not having your opinion in a story, the simple rules of having footwork in a story, um, what those are unfancied now.
Yeah.
Footwork is unfancied because you can. I mean, there's a lovely word for it called aggregation, where it's actually just stealing content.
Yeah.
You can copy paste. You can just rewrite it a bit so that Google doesn't catch it, and that's it. And then so much content is now user generated. So your audience is your best reporter because they will shoot a video or a picture of something ghastly that's happening, and suddenly that defines your news cycle. um, uh, and, I mean, and especially when 24/7 TV came in. I mean, I remember standing in my Hindustan Times newsroom, looking at the 10 TVs perched on top, and that is the defining moment when journalism started to go down the drain, where you saw these 10 screens and you would kid yourself into thinking that that is what happened in this huge country today. If you had that, you were covered. And before that, you were, so suddenly TV was shaping the narrative for print, not the other way.
Right.
And that's what's happened. It happens rarely, almost never, that a digital or a print medium does a story that TV follows. It's always the other way now. That's how the text has sort of abdicated. Footwork has abdicated. A couple of years ago, I was with the CEO of a large digital platform, not a startup, and I said, we are Gaon Connection is all these people you have on the floor and 1,000 others, because we are still old-fashioned. What happened was that as this so-called digital news revolution happened, reporters started abdicating the field. So the district coverage was not important. There would not be any district office. If there would be, the reporter would be given the task of collecting ads, and that is, whatever you call it, I mean, that is a prostitution of a kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's tragic that old-fashioned journalism is not valued, is not fancied anymore, and not just in India. I mean, I see it
It's true here.
elsewhere as well. Yeah. But I'm really proud that we've stuck on, we've surviving as Gaon Connection, as a rural media platform. Firstly, rural. Secondly, a platform that had no investor. I mean, and we turned profitable last year just before the pandemic. I'm exceptionally proud of what our team has done and stuck on. And even now, we refuse to do the kind of content that will get us easy clicks, and we just refuse to do that.
Right.
So it's a difficult time, but I think we've carved out our niche, and I think we have earned some respect. But my crib is that people like me, and I was on a discussion about journalism recently, and I said that, look, the good people of social media, and I meant it in a sarcastic way, never stand with us.
Yeah.
We never get the front row when it comes to talking about journalism. We are those people who are snuck away in the corner of the country, and chalo theek hai, kar rahe yaar, acha kuch kar rahe. So we've started changing the narrative. Just this last month, we've set up India's biggest rural insights platform. And that's a big deal. So suddenly we have people in 300 of India's 750 districts. There are community resource persons. As soon as we reach 750, we will know more than any other media in the country what Indians feel about issues.
Right.
And as we start airing that, broadcasting that, publishing that, people will have to listen to us. Governments will have to listen to us because we will know something they won't.
Tell me, did you run the risk of making rural journalism so attractive as to lure in the big daddies of mainstream media and basically swarm the place? Do you ever fear that? Or you think it's quite far away still?
When I launched Gaon Connection, the launch was on the 2nd of December 2012. 10 days before that, I got a call from one of India's biggest media companies, and their business head came down to Delhi to meet me, and they wanted to partner, which meant that they wanted to buy us off. We hadn't even started. And yes, I was afraid that we were setting up something that in a microsecond, any of these large media companies, they would throw money and set it off. But I realized कि मैं जो तपस्या करने जा रहा था ना,
हाँ.
वो ये नहीं कर सकते. ये पैसा फेंक सकते हैं, ये वो मेहनत नहीं कर सकते, ये फुटवर्क नहीं कर सकते. The ring fencing that I had done in terms of content, that there are these things I will never do. I do not have a horoscope column. I don't do Bollywood gossip. I'm not against film coverage, but I'm not interested in who's having an affair with who or how many, which film made X crores or whatever. I'm not interested.
You mean you don't have page 3 in airport look? Are you crazy, Neelesh?
I'm not. Yes. So I think, I wish someone would document, and I don't say it pompously, I wish someone would tell this story of what we have done to Indian journalism. We started off as nobodies, and today, we have the biggest of brands talking to us about rural insight. We have top government officials very curious about, hey, so our next report is on the digital behavior of the rural Indian. It'll come out in September. Everybody's interested suddenly.
Sure.
We have something they don't, and
Yeah.
we will do it so diligently and so objectively so I think this story has to be this story of how we created this place. When we started out, there was a study by CSDS, excuse me, that said that mainstream media devotes 2% of its space to rural India, and out of that, about 36% is on about stereotypes when something awful happens there. It's not changed dramatically, but we definitely find after Gaon Connection started and the years hence, we find more editorial page pieces on rural India, on agriculture. We find a definite shift. We find our stories being followed by top media organizations. It's a Sodama moment for us. It's a moment of victory. They still get more reach on the stories they did while copying us, but well, hey, someday we'll get there.
Why not? Yeah. Just the last bit about the journalism aspect of it. फिर थोड़ा 15-20 मिनट हल्का करेंगे आपके गानों के बारे में बात करनी है मुझे थोड़ी बहुत. You have seen two sides, the urban-centric journalism that mainstream media does. And now, for nearly a decade, at least if you include the planning of Gaon Connection, you've looked at the rural side of journalism. Tell us a bit about the kind of challenges that attend urban-centric journalism and the kind of challenges that you face as a rural journalism platform.
I think there is the challenge of taking that content to your audience. While our audience is not necessarily only rural, our audience is every rural-minded person who could very well be sitting in Chicago right now, or Mumbai, or wherever. So with that in mind, I mean, we have a English offering also, with English website, and a lot of traffic comes from the US. But yeah, the challenge is in news gathering, in the sheer footwork of it, and there are huge costs associated. How do you do field reporting in an era where aggregation is the norm, and it can be done very cheaply? That's the huge challenge. How do you get talent which is sensitive to rural India? That's also difficult. So it comes with a very peculiar set of problems. But now we find people from top media platforms applying to us for jobs, not just this summer when it was been a horrible bloodbath, but even before that, when we are suddenly attractive enough to reach out.
Right, right. Initially, I mean, for a while, I know for a fact because you and I used to talk. Your one of the challenges was that you might end up becoming a sort of a northern hinterland journalistic platform, Hindi-speaking belt, as it
Yeah,
were.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Is it still a challenge? Have you been able to expand, or do you have plans to do it? Because hinterland is across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was something we were very mindful of, and 2 years ago, we won a global YouTube competition, because of which we expanded to 19 states, and now we are in 28 states, and so we have someone or the other in every part of the country. The inside projects we do, I mean, we have people in Arunachal and Kashmir, and even Andaman and Nicobar. So I love to surprise people now. Just yesterday there was a meeting where someone introduced me as well, he runs Gaon Connection in Uttar Pradesh, and when it came to my turn, I said, well, I'm really happy to tell you we're in 300 districts in 28 states. So she quietly sent me a message during the meeting. I apologize, I haven't kept track of your progress.
That's a good apology.
Yeah.
2003 चलते हैं नीलेश.
जी.
जिस्म की बात करते हैं थोड़ी बहुत. जादू है नशा की बात करते हैं. रानी अभी आप ही ने लिखी है फिल्म के बारे में, हम क्या कर सकते हैं? आपने चूज किया जिस्म को, तो हम तो बात ही कर सकते हैं दूर बैठ के. जादू है नशा है. खैर, it remained one of your signature songs, although I mean, IMDb credits you with about 30 film projects, if that's the accurate number. About
Yes,
28 to be
25.
precise. Yeah. तो
नहीं, अभी और हो गए हैं हाल में.
अच्छा, अभी ऐड नहीं हुआ है फिर.
35 हो गए हैं.
Oh, very good. Good to know. तो जादू है नशा के बारे में कुछ बताइए, कैसे the genesis of that, because the song became quite a popular number.
So when I had gone to Mumbai to research for my hijacking book, I met our common friend Mahesh Bhatt, and I was there because the Indian Airlines hijacking was the only one in the world where the faces of the hijackers were known before the hijacking ended, and that was because of exceptional police work by Mumbai police. So I met him because I was there, and I had called up before going in another context, and so I went there. There were two musicians sitting on the floor and performing something, and wanted to make it big, but did not. And just by way of polite conversation, I said, मैं भी गाने लिखता हूँ. तो अरे सुनाइए. तो मैंने उनको एक गाना सुनाया जो मैंने कॉलेज के दिनों में लिखा था लड़कियों को प्रभावित करने के लिए.
अच्छा.
उसका the words were, ख्वाबों की ज़मीन है यादों का आसमां, मैं हूँ उदास शाम है और है धुआं धुआं. So Bhatt Sahab, I remember, suddenly stood up in the middle of the room and became very agitated. And after the first verse ended, he said, "Hit hai!" So I found this very odd behavior, and I've told him this, that I found these film people are strange people. That this was my first interface with Bollywood. बड़ा अजीब लोग हैं ये, कैसा reaction है इनका. Came back to Delhi where I then lived, and one day I saw Pooja Bhatt's interview in a TV channel, and she said, "I'm going to make a film called Jism." So I called up Bhatt Sahab, And just, for fun, I said, "Arey, मैंने अभी देखा आपकी बेटी का interview आया था, and it was on the news that I'm writing lyrics for you." And he paused for 1 second. He said, "Yes, the news was absolutely right. You are writing lyrics for us."
हमको पता नहीं है.
हमको पता नहीं है. So I went to Bombay and I wrote this first song was given to me. A lot of your listeners might not know that in Bollywood films, the music is given first and then you write to them. So I wrote something and he loved it, and then I came to New York. There's a US. This was October 2012. I came to the AP office at the Rockefeller Center,
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
because I was being prepared for an international sort of posting, which again could have been a life-changing moment in itself if I had said yes. And then the news clerk once came to me and she said there was a call for you from Mahesh Thatt, THATT was what the paper said.
Oh, wait.
And and I called him and he said, ये गाना बहुत बड़ा हिट होने वाला है, इसका एक ड्यूट वर्जन भी चाहिए जो कल रिकॉर्ड होना है. So I was in a service department in Manhattan and I had nothing to type on or write on. So I walked in Manhattan all evening and then at about 9 p.m. I went back. Now in India आप तो जानते हैं कि भाई ये तो कभी भी दफ्तर में वापस चले गए, ये हो गया वो गया. वो उसको बड़ा अजीब लगा कि ये वापस क्यों आया अभी 9 बजे. So long story, I had the guy who was on night desk. I mean, he found it a little odd.
Yeah.
So said, actually, I've started writing songs for Hindi films. So there's a recording. So he became like really excited. There's a recording and I have to send a song and, I have it here. I just need to mail it. So that's how it happened. And then when I came back, it was already like a big hit.
Just a couple of, I'll do toggle a bit. One is we are again witnessing rather insane hubbub over the aftermath of Sushant Singh Rajput's death and nepotism and entrenched interest and small town people coming in. And you are a small town guy and you emphasize that enough, I suppose. What are your challenges breaking in as a small town person in an industry which people condemn all the time as so self-absorbed?
I hate to disappoint you, but I have no struggle story. I had no problem getting in.
जरूरत क्या हमने किया क्यों फिर आपसे इंटरव्यू?
हाँ, मेरे कोई स्ट्रगल. मैं कहीं रेलवे स्टेशन पे नहीं सोया, मैंने कहीं किसी से पैसे नहीं मांगे. मैं तो जर्नलिस्ट था दिल्ली में. वहां से आ रहा हूँ. अच्छा, जब मैं जाता था बॉम्बे तो my meetings used to happen like that because I used to be in the city for like 3 days. तो यार नीलेश से मिल लेते हैं, वो आया हुआ है. So music composers or directors or whatever. My challenge was actually different because I was flirting with Bollywood. Right. I was an outsider in Bollywood by choice. I was not, Bollywood didn't make me an outsider. I was covering Kashmir, for God's sake, covering Chhattisgarh, driving on the highway, and Preetam is calling and saying, "Sir, wo love song bhej do na." And I'm going to, cover some ghastly news event.
See, that's the of a print journalist. I think that stood you in very good stead.
Absolutely. I remember when Manmohan Singh became Prime Minister for this 2004. I was sitting on outside Sonia Gandhi's home. उस सड़क के किनारे आप और हम सब बहुत टाइम बिताया हमने. I was sitting on the pavement because I had a deadline to write a song. And all around me, if you remember that time, nagare baj rahe, hathi aaye hue, there are buntings in the air, firecracker, and I am like hunkered in the middle of this crowd trying to write a love song. So I think that's what journalism taught me. It taught me to work to deadlines. Right. It taught me to insulate myself from everything. Aap story likh rahe ho, you're in the middle of chaos or a crowded cyber cafe or whatever, and you're finishing your story.
Right.
When I wrote one of my first song with Preetam, we were renovating our apartment in Lucknow, and we had gone to buy electrical fittings. So first verse I had written of a song, "Bolo na tum zara pyar ye hota hai kya." The film was called Fight Club. the second was stuck in my head. So as we sat at the shop, and I had passed the list of the kind of switches and plugs we wanted, and my father was sitting next to me. Midway, my hand stopped, and I took the list back, and I said, "Ek second, दूसरा अंतर आ गया."
Gigi,
And
I
I
fully
flipped it,
understand that.
and I flipped that and wrote as my father and the shopkeeper waited. You know, they knew some, okay, कुछ important हो रहा है. So I wrote, प्यार ये सुबह की सांवली धूप है, प्यार ये सुबह की मखमली धूप है, प्यार ये शाम का सांवला रूप है. ये मैंने switches खरीदने के बीच में लिखा है. That's what journalism prepared me for. And
Right. But see, you're demystifying it, but it's an innate talent. Not a lot of people can do that. I mean, you run the risk of making it sound too easy. So let there be no delusion among our young aspiring people that it's ऐसे ही हो जाता है, ऐसे ही नहीं होता है. उसमें काफी मेहनत लगती है. I'm going to rush a bit because अभी कसूर आपका है. आपने बड़े लंबे जवाब दिए हैं, तो मुझे थोड़ा बहुत
मैं माफी चाहता हूं.
No, माफी मत मांगिए. थोड़ा extend करेंगे इंटरव्यू 5-10 मिनट ज्यादा. I hope that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. It brings me to whether you enjoy lyrics any longer, because you do so many things. Number one, do you think it's worth your while doing lyrics? Or do you reach out anymore, or people come to you? How does the process work now?
I got quite fed up of writing lyrics after a point, because this is mid 2010s, like 12, 13. Because, and again, I'm going to join the dots, but the mobile revolution brought the ringtones. And the ringtones meant that you had to say something in that song in 30 seconds. And that something had to be so attention grabbing and hence banal in their logic.
Yeah.
So the hook lines started getting awful and more awful. And often the hook lines were handed to lyric writers कि भाई ये लिख दीजिए, इसके आगे गाना बना दीजिए. We were not structuring a song as how we would. So I started getting fed up of it, and I stopped writing, and I said no to everything that came my way. And after a point, people thought I'm just not interested. Listeners have often said कि आप फिर से क्यों नहीं लिखते? So, like my last film was Jagga Jasoos, in which I had a song called Mera Gaon Jhumri Talaiya Hai. There was a Salman Khan film, Bajrangi Bhaijaan, in which I had a song Kuch To Bata Zindagi.
Right.
So Kyun was a little before that, in which I had a song Kyun Na Hum Tum. Sorry, Barfi was a film in which I had the song Bhatak Le Na Bawre. So I would do songs when I would enjoy them. There was no compulsion. I would do it on my own terms. I was working on this another film, which is now going to be postponed because of the pandemic. It's a big film. But there's one film which will be kind of my comeback film as a lyric writer, which I'll let the producers talk about, but which is almost ready, and it'll be वो उसमें लिखे हैं मैंने गाने, उसमें मजा आया मुझे. I wrote them because I loved writing them. So I don't write lyrics for money anymore. I'm very happy writing songs for free for anybody who wants me to write them. I should love the melody. I should feel free enough to write them and be proud of those lyrics 10 years hence and not cringe.
Let me ask you a question that I asked Javed Akhtar in our very first broadcast on this show. It's completely random. Even then it was random for him, but मैं पूछने वाला हूँ आपको ही. You have to make a choice, because I have my choice between these two. Majroor Sultanpuri or Sahir Ludhianvi. And the reason I'm asking purely as a Hindi cinema lyricist, I'm sure you can guess what Javed might have said, but आप बताइए. I have my own logic for choosing the person that I have chosen. So आप बताइए.
I think Sahir. And I थोड़ा जमीनी, थोड़ा हल्की बगावत, हल्की वो जो एक the journalist in me, and then the romantic in me. वो जो एक meeting point है उनका. Maybe because. But आप बताइए.
नहीं, I've been a long advocate of Majroor Sultanpuri, head and shoulders above Sahir in terms of film lyrics. You're not talking just poetry, because film lyrics is a different logic altogether.
Yeah, right.
So I gave the example of Shagird, for instance, to Mr. Akhtar. सबसे पहले सुनो मियाँ करके वर्जिश बनो जहाँ चेहरा पॉलिश किया करो थोड़ी मालिश किया करो स्टाइल से उठे कदम. Now it takes great talent to write that. Because as you know, you're writing to a composition, right?
Yeah. As a film lyricist, it's a completely different ballgame.
So
and to still stay poetic, to still seem poetic to the world and to yourself.
Right.
That's a big deal. Yes, I think I would agree with you.
In that song, he uses the word dandy. Think about that.
Yeah.
Majroor. So anyway, I was silly saying I wanted to start to wrap up the last couple of things. Your niche has been extended emotionally demonstrative radio storytelling. One of the things that you do. You are pretty much the pioneer in that area. I'm not trying to make a comparison here, but if you look at, say, from the era of Amin Saini, who was a massive iconic figure he has been for the right reasons. There have been people on All India Radio who had their own names, etc. But in terms of sheer spread of what they do, I think your name comes up immediately after that. Do you have any sense of emulators on the horizon? Are there people emerging who might be trying to do something different, but something along the same lines?
Many people, and I don't like that because they should not be copying me. Then it's the same. They're carrying a baggage of convention that I didn't have. I was not copying anybody.
Right.
And when I see comments on social media tagging me, ki, sir, you're sounding like Neelesh Misra. I mean, वो नहीं करो आप. मुझे जो earnestness है voice में, and I have when I even watch a film or a web series or whatever, ये modality, tonality सही नहीं लगती है. ये ऐसे क्यों deliver कर रहा है? So I feel that the storytelling space in India, like I said, there's still it's very limited in terms of the number of storytellers we have, which is sad. They're out there. We haven't gotten to them. They haven't come to us. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to discover new voices, who have their original, their identities. And so yes, there are, I sometimes, randomly hear emulators. I've had some examples when people ripped off stories, jumbled some paragraphs, said it in a way, and then brought to my notice. And but a few people do I really like on radio. One is Saima, who I find very, very talented, but Baki kam dikhta talent.
जी. And before I let you go, I have to ask you this. कुछ नया कुछ अगर लिखा हो एक आध दो लाइनें सुना दीजिए हमारे व्यूअर्स को.
तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट के किसी कोने में शायद, तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट के किसी कोने में शायद खुशी महसूस करती हो मेरे होने में शायद. तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट छटपटाती रहती जैसे तुम्हारे होठों से आजाद होकर उड़ना चाहे. तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट छटपटाती रहती जैसे तुम्हारे होठों से आजाद होकर उड़ना चाहे. तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट चख ली मैंने नींद में कल. तुम्हारी मुस्कुराहट चख ली मैंने नींद में कल. भूल गया. Sorry.
कोई बात नहीं. I mean, up to this point, it's extremely evocative. And अपनी बात
भेजूंगा मैं आपको.
बिल्कुल अपनी बात भूल जाना वो एक शायराना अंदाज भी है वैसे. No, this has been wonderful, Neelesh. I want to thank you for your extended time, and I hope our listeners have found this interesting. And just as a little teaser, I'm not going to get into details on the show, but for the benefit of the Bharat FM followers, there is something brewing between Neelesh Misra and us, which we might announce at some point soon. I won't get into the details. Let me just say that he's a big daddy of the radio world, and we would be very happy to explore some things with him. So all the best, Neelesh, and
Thank you.
I'm grateful for your time. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत
Stop the stream.
This is Bharat FM.
Yeah.
No, I'll do